Okay, today we're going to talk about order of operations, and we have to follow a certain order when we are completing these problems. So let's look at the PEMDAS, what we call the PEMDAS here. Okay, we have please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. The P in please stands for parentheses. You're always supposed to work inside the parentheses first. The E for excuse stands for exponents. You do the exponents next. And then multiplication division, which is my dear, comes next. Now multiplication division, you do whichever one comes first, left to right. You do it in that order. If the division comes first left to right, then you have to do that first. And then lastly, you do the addition and subtraction. And that will give you the order of operations that you need to follow. Okay, so now let's go back and look at some examples. Okay, now we're going to look at our notes. We have this first example, but let's do that over here on a separate blackboard. Okay, the first example we have is 15 minus 2 squared minus negative 2 cubed. Okay, if we're following order of operations, we have to do parentheses first, but on this problem there's nothing to do inside the parentheses, so we're not going to worry about that. So then we're going to go to the next step, which is to complete our exponents. So let's work out our exponents here, 2 squared and negative 2 cubed. Now remember, negative 2 cubed, the negative is with the 2. So when you multiply that out, you're going to have negative 2 times negative 2 times negative 2, which of course is going to give us positive 4 times negative 2, which is negative 8. Okay. Alright, so let's go down here. We're going to have 15 minus 2 squared, that's just 2 times 2, which is 4, minus negative 2, remember we worked that out, and that is negative 8. So that's going to be minus a negative 8. We're going to have 15 minus 4, which is 11, and then minus negative 8 is really plus 8, and that's going to give us 19. Alright, let's look at another example over here. We have 45 divided by negative 5 times 3. Now you have to be careful because this one's a little tricky. You have to follow multiplication division left to right, and because our division is coming first, we're going to have to complete that first. So we're going to have 45 divided by negative 5, which is negative 9. Then we're going to bring down the multiplication times 3, and that'll give us negative 27, and that'll be the answer to that one. Okay, now let's look back at our notes and let's look at example 3 down here. Okay, on this one we have negative 4 minus a negative 4 squared. Now this again is dealing with our exponents here. Remember, when the negative is inside the parentheses, we're going to expand that out with the 4. So that would be negative 4 times negative 4. And we're going to complete our exponents first because that's what comes first in the order of operations. So we would have negative 16. Now notice the negative is not with the 4 here. So this simply means negative and then whatever 4 times 4 is, which of course is 16. So we're going to have negative 16 minus, I'm just bringing down my subtraction sign there, and then negative 4 squared is a positive 16 because you take the negative and a negative times a negative is a positive. Now negative 16 and negative 16 is going to give me the answer, which is a negative 32. So be careful when you have the signs combined with the exponents. Here's another example. Negative 3 squared plus 3 squared. Again, the negative is not going to be multiplied out with the 3 here. It just simply means negative and then 3 times 3, which would give me negative 9, plus 3 squared, which is positive 9, and I would get 0 here. Okay, let's look at another example on the blackboard. Okay, now let's look at example 4 from the notes, and we're going to work this one together. We're going to follow our order of operations, which says to do inside the parentheses first. There's nothing to do inside the parentheses. On this one, the purpose of the parentheses is to represent multiplication. So if we look at our numerator, which is the numbers on top first, the only thing that we have to do is the multiplication. So we're going to do that first. We're going to have negative 3 times negative 2, which of course will give us positive 6. That's what we're going to have in the numerator there. Now in the denominator we're going to have negative 4 squared plus 5. Again, the negative does not go with the 4 as we multiply it out, so it's going to be negative whatever 4 squared is, which is 16, and then plus 5. Okay, if we finish our numerator, we're going to have negative 22 here. Make that a negative, over negative 16 plus 5, which is negative 11. And that'll give us the final answer, which is positive 2. Okay, let's look at example 5 from our notes here. And this is a case where we have brackets and parentheses. You always start within the innermost parentheses. So we're going to complete 4 minus 8 first. That's the same as 4 and negative 8, which is going to give us negative 4. Now, when you're doing the longer problems, do not take any shortcuts and bring everything down. So I'm going to bring the 5 down, the minus, and then that is going to be negative 4. So I'm just going to replace negative 4 in the parentheses there. Okay, I'm going to continue working within the brackets now. And the next thing to do inside the brackets is the exponent. So I'm going to square the negative 4, and I'll bring that answer down. So I'm bringing everything else down, and I'm going to have 5 minus negative 4 times negative 4, which is 16. Now I just have to finish 5 minus 16. I'm going to bring the 6 and the plus, the 2, times. Remember, right here, that means times. It means 2 times whatever I get here. Well, 5 and negative 16 is negative 11. So we're going to have 6 plus negative 22. Remember to do the multiplication next because that's what comes first in the order of operations. So now we can add and get the final answer, which is negative 16. Okay, for our last example here, let's look at example 6. Now, this first part of example 6 is an example where you have absolute value in the problem. You're going to start within the absolute value just as you would start inside a grouping symbol. So inside the grouping symbol we have negative 11 in the numerator and 2 minus 12 in the denominator. There's nothing to do to the numerator, so I just brought that over. That's negative 100. But in the denominator we can subtract 2 minus 12. Or 2 and negative 12, which is negative 10. Okay, now you can work that out. Negative 100 divided by negative 10 is positive 10, and the absolute value of 10 is 10. Because remember, absolute value is measuring distance from 0, and 10 is 10 units from 0. Okay, we have a second example down here that involves absolute value, but let's go to our blackboard for this one. We're going to work this one out together. Okay, remember the absolute value is just like any grouping symbol, so you're going to start within the grouping symbol. So we're going to bring everything else down. Remember to bring down the 7. And we're going to have negative 1 and negative 6. If you want to do keep, change, like we've done in class, you can, but you'll see either way that that's going to give you negative 7. Now when you have a 5 on the outside, that means you're going to multiply whatever you get, but you have to take the absolute value first. So we're going to remove the absolute value bars first. When we remove the absolute value bars, the absolute value of negative 7 becomes a positive 7, but we're still multiplying that value times 5, so I'm going to put in parentheses there to indicate the multiplication. And this is going to be 7 minus 35, because we would do the multiplication next, and 7 and negative 35 is negative 28. And there's our final answer.